Right, so F175 happened this week. The F1 Commission happened this week. We've already talked about Monaco, but the other interesting thing that came out of the F1 Commission and what the FIA have been debating is what the engine rules, the power unit rules, will be for Formula One from 2030. So if you're sick of turbo hybrids and ERS and all the rest of the power unit nonsense that we have been listening to, and you crave a return to a screaming banshee V10, perhaps the FIA have the answer, because Mohammed bin Sulayem,
Oh,
everyone's favourite dictator, said this week, um, this week's F1 launch in London has triggered a lot of positive discussion on the future of the sport. And while we look forward to the introduction of the 2026 regulations on chassis and power unit, we must also lead the way on future technological motorsport trends. We should consider a range of directions, including, wait for it, the roaring sound of the V10 running on sustainable fuel. Ammar, to that, you respond, go.
oh, I love it. Again, I hate to be siding with Mohammed bin Sulayem on anything. I feel like I've done that a few times already. I love it. I'd love to see the V10s back. I mean, that has been the essence of Formula One in the way I have come to love the sport and I've come to enjoy it. I want that sort of roaring speed, that sort of blinding noise, if you will, and the ability to enjoy the sport in a way that it deserves to be. So I'm with you 100%. Bring back the V10s.
With
I
who,
have no
Ammar?
problem with that.
Who,
Why
who
would
are you
anyone
with?
have a problem with that?
Ah, well, I can
Is it?
probably
Are
cite
we
at
worried
least,
about Audi now
but I
again?
can probably cite about 5 or 6 different companies that may well
I
not
know. Come
be not
on.
be interested. How are you going to get Honda, Audi, Renault? Well, although Renault don't even exist, but Mercedes certainly. How are you going to get those three to sign up to an engine
Well, it's not going
regulation
to happen
that is
right away.
basically just uh, normally aspirated internal combustion engines burning fossil fuels when
Why wouldn't you?
everybody
Why
in the
did you do?
industry is heading towards electrification? How are you
Are we
gonna
sure
how
about
are you gonna
that?
do
Are we
that?
sure about that?
I
Are
don't
we
think you
sure
tell
that
me.
everyone is heading to 100% electrification? I think that I mean, I can only speak for the states here, but I think the trend has sort of slowed down a little bit. I mean, there's this huge,
Ooh, has it?
electric vehicle boom, and then I mean, I don't see a whole lot of, I don't see a whole lot of Mercedes, for example, being sold. I see a lot of Teslas being sold. Different topic for a different day, but there isn't necessarily the same sort of appeal with that. And I would argue that going back to those normally aspirated engines, if you can find that synthetic fuel that is truly sustainable, and I'm not scientifically skilled enough to know exactly what that means in terms of its potency, its ability to be efficacious, and also its environmental concern. So I'm going to just assume that they have found a fuel that sort of meets the criteria for what we think would be great for the sport, would find power, but not
But Amar,
pollute
this
the
this
environment
this
in the
is the
same way.
problem, though, isn't it? Right? The manufacturers are not going to go for this when the most profitable company in the entire world is an electric car company.
Why not?
So
They
how,
would go
how
through that.
so how are they
I
going to do it? So
they, well, because
let's take the green
Shez,
side out of it. If you're just talking about profits, if we're saying that the most profitable car company in the world right now is an electric car company,
well, I think we have
why
to
would
be
they
careful
rubber
with
stamp
going
a
that way.
normal
I mean,
why
I
would
think
they
that
rubber stamp a fossil fuel
well,
burning engine regulation?
Shez, I think that Tesla as a company being profitable is let's pump the brakes on that a little bit. I mean, their stock is highly lucrative. That doesn't necessarily mean, I mean, there's a lot of sort of value in it that hasn't been really backed in the best way that we can. And there are other issues right now that sort of cross the political eye. We shouldn't get into. I'm just going to push back on the idea that why would these companies go back, right? Because all of the traditional manufacturers have systems, operations in place to build normally aspirated engines. So I don't imagine that
But
they
why are
couldn't
they
do
going to
that. And
build
look,
those in the premier motorsport category if what they're selling on the street, not on the street in their dealers, is electric cars? Why would they want to have such a disparity between
because they're not doing
what they're
that. They're not.
racing and what they're selling?
Well, again, I would just argue that that's not being done strictly over here. Like the electric vehicle sort of consumption has come down significantly right now, and I think that there are some real challenges there, right? I imagine that as time passes, there will be better car batteries for those of us that drive regular cars, of course, right? And so I think that that'll happen. But I think the future, at least as of right now, is actually hybrid, in which case these manufacturers are incentivized to go down this path
Yeah, so
because
why are we not going to
if they
do?
truly have
Why are we not going to?
sustainable fuels,
Why are we not
then
going to continue with hybrids then? If that's
well, I
what they're
think we might.
selling,
I mean, I
why
think,
would we
but
not continue with
okay,
hybrids in Formula One? I don't want
well,
hybrids.
because I think
That's
the
not. They're
electric
not the
side.
same thing, and I really don't like them.
Well,
But why
but
would
the
we not continue with
hybrid
that?
Formula One car is different from the hybrid typical sort of like, I mean, there's no sort of boost button or like,
Yeah,
you
but it
know,
doesn't
like, and
sound like a
you don't
V10,
have
does
that
it?
really.
Like we've had turbo hybrids since 2014, and the problem with them is that number one, they don't rev because there's a fuel flow limit.
Yeah, of
They have
course.
a
I
they have a
mean,
turbo in the exhaust which sucks out the sound, so you don't get the lovely screaming V10 V12 that you
yeah.
used to get in the 90s. And on top of that, we know that at least 160 brake horsepower of the power output from that car is basically coming from electrification anyway, which adds weight and complexity. None of those things are
Let me,
good, but it's what the manufacturers want because it's what they're selling in showrooms. Tell me I'm wrong.
well, I don't think you're wrong. So first of all, you're not fully wrong. But here's what I would posit to you. One, Formula One cars have DRS. Normal cars don't. So not every Formula One innovation is sort of engineered to sort of translate into the road car, right? That's not always there. You do research, you kind of do these things, you go to space, and then you figure out ways to do other things efficiently, and that's sort of how this works, right? So I think the manufacturers could be in it. If let's just say again, I know nothing about synthetic fuels, but if there truly has been a synthetic fuel that's been cracked, it's going to be so much easier to quote unquote go back to regular combustion engines because guess what? There are gas stations everywhere in the world. You don't even have to look it up on a map anymore. Certainly in the States, I could walk from a gas station to another. I could throw a tennis ball from one. I mean, sometimes there are gas stations on top of gas stations. So if there's a way to kind of do it that way, I think a lot of us that haven't bought electric vehicles might want to buy our next one where it is just easy to not have to think about where I'm going to charge my car next and kind of do that. But because that's still a practical problem for the day, something that Formula One teams don't necessarily have to worry about because they're not charging their car halfway through the race. We are doing it in a day-to-day life. So Mercedes would be well incentivized to kind of do that.
But
Ferrari has made its brand on engine noise. I mean, that is one of the things that's synonymous with that. You don't buy a Ferrari for
sure,
it to
but
be a practical
The
car.
problem
So
is in the UK from 2030, manufacturers aren't going to be allowed to sell petrol or diesel cars of any
okay.
description. What do you do then?
Well, I mean, again, we're now getting into the political sphere of it. It sounds like, listen, we had a similar thing here going in the U.S. It's all changed, right? So again,
It's not
I don't
changed
want to,
here
I
yet,
don't,
though.
yeah, huh? Say it again.
It's not changed here yet, though. They're still planning to
Yet,
do that.
right? But also, what is it? Did you say 2030 or 35?
2030.
Still, that's still more than 4 years away, man.
Ooh.
Brand new cars, you're right. Look, they're right. But if there's a synthetic fuel that's found that again meets the criteria for everything,
Okay.
I cannot see why there wouldn't be an exception to that.
Okay.
I just don't. And
Uh,
it could be that it would be hybrid too.
okay. I just want to have my 2 cents on this because this is something that's close to my
Sure.
heart, right? It like for me, I grew up in an era of Formula One where we had the greatest engines of all time, 3-litre V10 screaming our hearts out at 21,000 RPM. There is nothing better than that sound. Why can we not go back to it? So there are a couple of little things, and we probably should talk about them. It is true that in the UK, that the UK government is planning to stop selling petrol and diesel cars by 2030 so that everything is electric. But the problem with that is that nobody's bloody buying them. Nobody wants to buy an electric car. Ammar, I looked at how much a Porsche Taycan Performance cost brand new 5 years ago. Do you know how much it costs in this country?
No idea.
With options, probably about £100,000, right? £100,000.
Oof.
So that same car now, with 30 odd thousand miles on it, costs £38,000. Like it's dropped
Yeah,
more than
exactly.
half of its value in
Of
five
course.
years. And you know why? Because who the heck wants to buy a second-hand electric car with a knackered battery? Like the shelf life of that car, its effective working life isn't enough. People aren't going to want to buy them. So there's a tension here between what governments want and what punters in the street actually want to buy. Because most people, like you, Ammar, still want to have their gasoline or petroleum in this country car to go around in. and and it may be that the FIA for once have hit the nail on the head. And I understand that MBS is kind of trying to do this to drum up some support after everybody booed the FIA at F175. And I get that there are ulterior motives, but in and of itself, it's not the wrong thing to do, because with a naturally aspirated V10 running on sustainable fuels, you can literally have your cake and eat it. And what it means is that you have smaller, lighter cars. What were we talking about in our Monaco episode? We want smaller, lighter, simpler cars that sound incredible, but you're not losing that green element. And when you're talking about synthetic fuels, the whole point of Formula One from 2026 is that we are going to fully synthetic fuels. And there is no greater test bed for what you're going to see in your car than the heat of competition. So if you've got Formula One cars and Formula One teams developing synthetic fuels to eke out efficiency, to eke out performance, that's what you're going to see in your road car. And that is much greener than a carbon fossil fuel burning factory creating the electricity that powers your green Tesla, right? That's not green, and it's not actually
And what it
doing
takes to construct them, by the way, too.
correct. So it's not actually doing the thing that you have set out to do. So are there manufacturers that are going down that route already? Ammar, of course there are. So currently, Porsche have a GT department. All their GT3s and GT3 RSs are all powered by a normally aspirated flat six. Lamborghini, they've just released their brand spanking new range, the Rivuelto and the Temerario, both of which come with shiny brand new V12 and V8 power respectively. And the icing on the proverbial cake, Bugatti. You know what Bugatti are doing, Ammar? Currently, they are going to sell the Tourbillon, their new hypercar, with a normally aspirated V16. Yes, there's a hybrid element to it, but it's a normally aspirated 10,000 RPM V16. The sound is going to be unbelievable. So it's not as if car manufacturers, and just note, all three of those are from the VW group. If we're talking about Audi turning up to be in F1 and they're doing it because we have to have a hybrid powertrain, well, group members in their own group are using normally aspirated high revving engines that sound incredible. And Ferrari also, then this brand spanking new 12 cilindri supercar has a normally aspirated V12, as does their SUV, the Pura Sangue. I mean, a freaking V12 SUV. So if the future of the performance road car is actually headed towards the same thing that we want in our Formula One cars, there actually isn't, I don't think, a political reason why you cannot have a sustainable fuel that is already being developed anyway from 2026 in a lighter, smaller, simpler, normally aspirated V10 powered Formula One car. The drivers would love it. They'd sell it to the bones. Everybody would be on board with this. And you cannot turn around to the Green Brigade and say that they cannot turn around to you and say that you are polluting the world, because actually on this front, F1 wouldn't be. Have your cake and eat it. That has to be the message. Ammar, any remarks?
Yeah, you said so much in there that I 100% agree with, right? And I think the one thing we've kind of forgotten in this EV revolution is that most consumers desire convenience, right? And so there is no better way to make it convenient than the way it really has been for how many ever decades it has been since we've been using petroleum or gasoline cars, right? And it's been such a, something that we don't have to think about. So I think that there's no reason why even there couldn't be a sort of a shift in trends when it comes to just that way of consumption too. I couldn't agree with you more, Shez, on the fact that having these V10s would actually make racing a lot better ultimately, right? I mean, right now we see that there are so many artificial elements to racing that involve, you gotta charge up your battery, you gotta do this, you gotta do that. It's not just about going slow or fast anymore, right? It's become so much about that. And yes, while reliability in this regard has been much improved, I think that you could go back to it being even more reliable,
It
if I
would
can
be.
say
Of
that.
course it would
It would be
be. Of course
100%
it
more
would be.
reliable, right?
And
You
Ammar,
wouldn't have to
to your
worry.
raceability point, right?
Yeah.
That the reason that F1 a lot of the time in the mid noughties and 90s was a bit dull is because we were still using overbody aero. We've now had a ground effects revolution. The whole point of it was to make these cars easier to follow. So bring that philosophy in, but have these lighter cars that are easier to race. That's what F1 wanted. They said that's what the FIA had tried to create with these regulations, more raceable cars. And they did all the hard work with ground effect. Do the easy stuff. Do the easy stuff. Make it light. Make it simple. Make it sound great. Give us those sustainable fuels. Have your cake and eat it. I think we're both in agreement on this one.
You said it so well. I want to have no single word after.
Boom.
That was the best argument I've heard.
Yeah, there we
You
go.
FIA president.
There we go. FIA, F1, manufacturers, do the right thing. Don't listen to those cynics that tell you the manufacturers don't have a reason to sign off on this. They absolutely do. Tell everyone. Normally aspirated V10s on synthetic fuel. Bring them back. That's what we want. As usual, please like, please subscribe, please leave us a comment. We will read every single one. We will reply to every comment as if we can. But also tell us what you think. What engine format would you like to see? Am I barking up the wrong tree? Are you somebody that wants us to go fully electric? That will never happen, but maybe that's what you want and you think that we're talking utter nonsense. Let us know. We want to hear from you. We'll read all those comments and we will see you guys in the next one.
Later.